Hi everybody, Lydia here with Build Show, and today we're gonna debunk some common drywall myths. So these are kind of just things I've pulled from your guys' comments on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff of you should have done it this way, or I do it this way, or you know, whatever it is. Starting off, I've been in the trade for 20 years, and I definitely have dealt with my fair share of things, but I definitely, you know, how to tape correctly is one thing I know inside outside. It's what I do every single day. It's what I've done every single day for 20 years. So let's kind of run through a couple myths. And, you know, if you choose to do it this way, go for it. Though, you know, there's some things I will say definitely don't do, but there are some things that people do that are not needed. So first things first, wetting paper tape. There is literally no reason to do this. It's paper. All you're gonna do is like make it soft and squishy. And what I think is happening, and why I think people like to do this, is because you're using mud that is way too thick to tape with. So this is mud straight out of the box. This is actually pretty creamy for straight out of the box. But you know, let's say I go to tape on here, and then I get my wet tape, put it on there. And the tape already looks gross. It's all soft and squishy. But what I think, and why I think this is so popular, or why people like to do this, is because instead of using the correct consistency of taping mud, you're getting this wet, which then makes the mud wet. So let's go ahead and actually see how this wipes down. I've actually never done this, but I think, you know, oh God. So essentially the water is just getting into the mud, making the mud thinner. So instead of just thinning your mud down, you're just thinning. Ugh. So instead of using the right consistency mud, you're just putting on wet tape, and it just made a disaster. And it was gonna wrinkle. It's like some of the edges are already lifting up, so I can't recommend this at all. You know, it's gonna soak up the moisture from the mud if you have it thin enough, so you don't really need to be wetting it, and that was just very unpleasant. So I would definitely X-nay that one. So let's see what happens when we tape with the right consistency. This is just some mud mixed up with some water straight from a box like that, put in a bucket, mixed with water. So as you can tell here, it's thinner, it's already gonna spread better. And then we're gonna take our dry tape, in there. Okay, now let's see how this wipes down. So that was much better. I mean, the wet tape was ridiculous. Not only that, but I think it's probably gonna shrink back pretty significantly using super wet tape, because all the moisture is just gonna like soak out of there, and then it's just gonna like probably shrink back incredibly, and kind of just really cause you problems. And then, you know, when we have our mud the right consistency, not only that, but it bedded a lot better. That looks a lot better than it did with the wet tape. And the tape gets kind of soft, because it's soaking up all that moisture from the mud. I don't know. I mean, the dry tape looks much better, and this is just kind of like soggy and weird. Anyway, don't wet your tape. No need to. Another common myth is putting dish soap in your mud. Don't do it. It doesn't do anything. It stings your eyes so bad when you sand. And it doesn't need to be in the product. You know, there's a lot of people are like, just a squirt of dish soap. So let's go ahead and actually test it. Okay, so I have this mud in my pan. That mud is just straight up. This mud, I'm just gonna add like a tiny drop of dish soap into it. All right, so we're gonna go ahead. This one has the soap in it. We're just gonna go ahead, we'll make a line. I'm going to coat up to there with the soapy mud, and then we'll coat on that side with the non-soapy mud. Just smells like dish soap. is not a great knife, but whatever. Okay. So I think a common thing is thinking that dish soap makes no bubbles. This is a very common, like even with mud that's mixed up right there, you're gonna get bubbles occasionally. Like it's not the end of the world, you can take care of it, but as we can tell here, the dish soap did not stop any bubbles from forming. Maybe a little bit more bubbly, honestly. Okay, so there's our dish soap mud. Okay, now let's try it with straight up mud, and it looks, I don't know, it looks normal. It doesn't look any different, I don't think. You know, I'm not seeing anything that's like, oh, the soap made this so much better. So let's try it with the regular mud. All right, so we have our pure mud here. Let's see if it acts any differently. See, bubbles are about the same. I don't think there's really any less bubbling. Doesn't smell as good. It doesn't have that soapy scent. Okay, there we go. I really don't think that there's anything different one bit about either of these. They both, you know, are coating great. I really think it all comes down to having your consistency correct with your mud when it comes to adding soap or not adding soap. Essentially, all that soap is going to do is void your warranty. If there ever is a problem, like they send you a faulty box that doesn't have something in there, you have mud falling off the walls, and they come in to check and they can tell that you've used soap, you're going to like not have any coverage at all. And there's really absolutely no reason to add this. I mean, we've got this side, we've got that side. They both look almost identical. So keep that in mind. You really don't need to be adding it at all. What I really think it came from, why I think it's gotten popular, why it's still kind of hanging around this old myth of adding soap makes it better, is back in the day, like in the 60s and 50s, they had only one mud and it was just all purpose and it was thick and it was hard to work with. So they added soap to make it a little bit, you know, a little bit more give, a little more slip. But now with all the modern muds that we have with +3 taping muds, ultra lightweights, dust control, machine muds, all of those things, they're all formulated to do different things. So we don't need to be adding soap to get the consistency that we're looking for. So no soap, stay away from it. It just burns your eyes anyway. Another myth would be thicker is better when it comes to mud. And I think so many people just grab box mud and they just are like straight onto the wall with it. So let's go ahead and look at it. This is mud straight out of the box. It's like pretty bubbly. Let's see, I'll throw some up on the wall. So like say I'm coating with this, look at that. Like that is not fun. It's so thick. It just has tons of bubbles in it. And it's super important to mix your mud to a thinner consistency because it's just so much easier to work with and your results are just going to be so much better. Like, that's just super thick compared to our other mud that we have mixed up here, you know, and look at how much easier that is to spread, number one. And number two, there's less bubbles. It looks better. It's easier to cut an edge with. It's easier to spread evenly. And if you add water to your mud, yes, it will shrink back a little bit, but it's going to be so much easier to use than the super thick stuff is. And this stuff is going to shrink back anyway too. They're both going to shrink back because it just kind of is what mud does. As it dries, it shrinks and it pulls back. That's why everything needs so many coats. So, you know, 2, 3 coats, depending on what level you're going to. Sometimes even 4, depending on your environment, humidity, and how things have been drying. So do yourself a favor, thin your mud down. Don't use it straight out of the box. You're gonna have much better results. You're not gonna be overfilling. You're not gonna have, you know, skip marks. Something that can happen, especially with like really thick mud, is you can kind of like get chattery because you're having such a hard time pulling your knife smoothly over the surface. So thinner is better, not too thin, obviously, because if you go really, really thin, then you're gonna start messing with the properties. But the manufacturers know that we all add water to the muds, and they're made and formulated to take water to be thinned down. So don't be afraid to kind of, you know, start off with a little bit, maybe like a cup of water per box, mix it up, see how it's doing. You can always do it by hand too. So, you know, you can take out a couple scoops out of a box, put some water in there and like a couple splashes, and then mix up pan by pan if you're not using a huge amount of mud at the same time. But typically we're doing big boxes and we're thinning it down, thin to win. It makes it so much easier. Anyway, that's it for me this week. Don't wet your tape, don't put soap in it, and mix it up and thin it down. Anyway, I will see you guys next week with a brand new video on Build Show, and follow me on all the socials under Drywall Shorty. See you guys later.